informative information. I've seen a few different presentations on vaping, and every time I gather something very interesting that I hadn't learned before, so thank you. So I'll introduce our panel members here. Our first panel member is Kaylee, the SHIP coordinator. And then we have Stephanie Schmidt, and she is from the treatment center. And then we have Heather, and she's the RN. I'm sorry, I don't remember what.
Nurse practitioner at Mayo Clinic and Wells.
Nurse practitioner at Mayo Clinic and Wells. Yes, thank you. And then we have Officer Myers, and Deputy Myers from the Drug Task Force for the Faribault County Sheriff's Department. We have School Resource Officer Ryan Murphy, and we have our Dean of Students, Joe Kuchenmeister. So I'll start off with the first question, and this is for either Joe or Officer Murphy. It is, what are you seeing with vaping at the school level?
I guess in comparison this year to previous years, I wouldn't necessarily say right now I'm seeing it a lot more than I have in the previous year or two. But certainly, you know, I know when we get together as administrators, specifically athletic administrators, that's one thing that we're hearing a lot more is the prevalence of ineligibilities due to kids that are vaping and using e-cigarettes. So it is a concern, it is a growing concern, and so I think it's great that we're having this opportunity to not only learn more about it, but then to address some questions.
You know, what I'm seeing here at the school is more awareness. I'm seeing a lot of the teachers, a lot of our staff members are more aware of it. So when kids are taking extra long bathroom breaks, we're definitely getting notified of those. Or if they're going to the bathroom, you know, more often than the normal student.
Every day.
Yeah. So we're constantly getting notified, so we're kind of able to, you know, try to intervene at those levels. And we've had some success with that. I think this year, I want to say we've maybe captured about 4 devices so far. And one of the devices I didn't know what it was in the pod. It's kind of that silver, was it the teardrop looking item? That was kind of one of the items that, and they're really, I mean, you can't see them in people's pockets. I mean, it's something that's
Very discreet.
and it's very discreet. And they're doing it, like we were discussing before the meeting, they're going in their clothing and they're, so a lot of these, I'm sure you're gonna get to it, but a lot of the detection devices might not work in those situations. So they're very discreet, but we also rely on the student data that says most of our kids aren't participating in this. They're also the eyes and ears, and they're reporting it. So when they see their peers doing it, they're also kind of reporting it. So that's something we're seeing definitely increase on.
Wow, that's great. Is there, would you say, one group of students that it seems like this epidemic is targeting over other groups of students? Or do you think?
I don't think so. I think it doesn't really carry, any group is getting important.
So this next question is for the shift coordinator. Where are the most students getting their e-cigarettes from? Can you name the top 3?
So I think the first would be social sources. So that's friends, peers, and they're getting it because they know people that are 18. And then the second source was vape shops. But from this data, the USC data, that did include some 18-year-olds, so maybe that was why it was second highest. And then the third would be internet sales.
Next question specifically for Joe. What was one message you want to get out to the community about vaping?
Well, Officer Murphy talked a little bit on this already, but that's just that the majority of our students are not doing this, and we have that evidence from our positive community norms survey that was done in 2017 and 2019. You know, I think the statistic that was up in the presentation earlier was 88.4% of USC students vape less than monthly, and 70.7% have never. So that's still a good percentage. That's still the majority, and that's what we want to focus on. yes, it is a concern and a growing concern, and we're going to continue to focus on that, but the majority are still not involved.
So this is the next question for Officer Murphy. What are the school consequences for students getting caught vaping nicotine? First offense, second offense. Is it something that's handled on the law enforcement end, or is that more like school discipline?
I'm gonna refer to Joe about the school consequences, but the legal consequences, just be like using tobacco. It's a product that contains nicotine, and it would be, cited for possession of tobacco. Ultimately, and there's also kind of another step to that of, it depends where they're getting it from too, and that person can also be cited. The first offense for that, for furnishing tobacco to a minor, is a misdemeanor. The second is a gross misdemeanor. So it kind of goes up in severity. As a person or parent, which I hope not, is furnishing that to a child, that would be a crime. But the school consequence, I'll let Joe talk about that.
Yep, so we have a no tolerance policy for the use of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, and e-cigarettes and vaping tools certainly fall under that same umbrella here. So if a student is using or caught using or even in possession, whether it be on purpose, by accident, it's an automatic 3-day out of school suspension. And to take it even further, then there are state high school league ineligibilities that you would look at, some consequences for students not being able to attend certain school events, if it falls during that suspension time. And that's the one thing I think that maybe I've tried to hone in on from the activities director side of things too. When we meet with all of the parents and the athletes at the beginning of the school year, in that fall athlete parent meeting, I try to really make it known that these vaping tools and this vaping paraphernalia, it falls under the exact same umbrella as alcohol, tobacco use, or drug use. And so if they're doing that, they're going to have the exact same consequences they would if they were using any of the other products. And I think, I'm hoping that that's getting through to more and more kids, but that's still a concern. And I said earlier, it's not just happening here. I'm hearing from other activities directors that it's happening on the bus, on the way home from a sporting event, and then kids are ineligible, or there's something that's put on Snapchat, and then kids end up ineligible, and they aren't quite, comprehending the fact that it does. It falls under that same exact umbrella with those same exact consequences. Oh, and that includes whether the vape pen has nicotine, which we know they do, or if it's just the THC oil or the water. It's mainly just water. It all falls under that same umbrella. So
I just want to say that I've been to those presentations at the beginning of the year for our student athletes, and it's also really important that the parents understand it too, because some of the parents don't understand that consequence. They say, well, wait a minute, all it is, and they think it's very insignificant. So we kind of have that hurdle too. So it's really important, and Joe does a good job of driving that home at the beginning of the school year with our student athletes. So I've kind of those, and it's very informative, and it's important information.
Thank you. This next question is for Stephanie at the treatment center on the other end of the table. What percentage of patients coming to the adolescent treatment center are coming because of e-cigarette use or involve e-cigarette use?
So this is kind of a difficult question to answer because there's not going to be a hard and fast statistic that's going to say student vaped or client vaped, got caught, and now we're going to do an assessment that says that they need chemical health treatment. I reluctantly use the word gateway because it has such a negative connotation to it, and we've kind of been burned on the word. But I think the data that was just shown to you shows that we have a very, very fragile adolescent brain, and that adolescent brain is very susceptible to things. And the earlier we introduce chemicals to that brain, the earlier we introduce addictive things, and they become addicted faster. The scariest statistic I can give you is that the youngest students we serve are 12. So just pausing a little bit so that you hear that age. And the thing is a 12-year-old isn't getting there because they're smoking cigarettes or using nicotine.
So prior to the age of 12, they were exposed to a more illicit drug than that created an addiction so strong that it is creating havoc in the rest of their lives. And so what I want to caution people about is, even if you still subscribe to the attitude that it is still just nicotine, the earlier that brain is addicted to nicotine, the earlier they're going to jump to other drugs, because pretty soon nicotine is no longer enough. And I have the luxury of not only being at a treatment center, but I'm in a school as well, and I can tell you, these kids are fighting a battle they can't win. The first puff that they took was their choice. After that, they were sold a bill of goods, and they no longer have control. And so now they need our help, and we need to do something to help them. So, is it the vape device that got them there? No. But they started somewhere, and they trusted a friend who handed them something, and they didn't know what was in it. And it could have been nicotine, could have been THC, and it could have been a whole lot of other host of chemicals. If it can be in liquid form, that device can hold it. And so they are vaping heavier drugs. Sorry to be the downer.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie.
It's interesting too, a lot of students know that cigarettes are bad, the traditional cigarettes, they won't share them with the younger population, but they don't understand fully that the vaping devices are bad, so they do share those with the younger generation.
Thank you, Kaylee. This next question would be for Heather. As a professional in the medical field at Mayo, what are some of the health effects that you're concerned about?
Well, I think at this point it's the lung injury that we're seeing, and it's now been reported in all 50 states. And the fact that we don't exactly know what's causing this lung injury. We know it's the multitude of chemicals that are in these devices, and kids that are vaping, you know, THC, and then without THC, there's cases of both, lung injury with both. And the hard part is that the symptoms of this lung injury are overlapping so many of the other symptoms of many other illnesses, especially this time of year. You see so many patients coming in with classic cough and shortness of breath, and so you're treating them, and these lung injuries aren't being identified until treatment is failing, and then they're finding that. So, and then getting back to the nicotine, all the bad effects on adolescents with that, with the brain development, and looking at that statistic about how much nicotine is actually in those devices is phenomenal. So I wasn't aware, especially those newer, I can't remember what you call them, the Soren ones, yeah. So, and I think, again, awareness, kids just don't know. I mean, they have no idea probably that they're ingesting that much, so.
Thank you, Heather. This next question is for the SHIP coordinator. How can we get through to our kids about the dangers of vaping?
We definitely want to start with those tough conversations, and just making sure that they're informed about the difference. That e-cigarettes are bad, and it's another great way to get to youth is with other youth. So that's a lot of great programs I've seen is youth communicating to other youth that they are bad. So when students are coming to professionals and letting them know that other students are vaping, that's great, because they are recognizing those concerns, but just making sure to have those tough conversations.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Kuchermeister. What education are students receiving about e-cigarettes that you're aware of?
Well, I know here in school, I've talked with both Todd Rasmussen and Brad Hoos, who are our health teachers here, and that is becoming an area that they're honing more in on. They're spending more time in their classes talking about e-cigarettes and the dangers that they're seeing and some of the trends that we're hearing about tonight.
Thank you. So this next question's either for Heather or Stephanie. Why do youth state they are using e-cigarettes?
Okay, so the number one answer is they're using them to treat a mental health illness, either diagnosed or diagnosed. It always alarms me and just baffles me when they truly believe that the use of an illicit drug is safer than a pharmaceutical that is prescribed to them by a medical doctor. They don't even see them as the same. They see the drug as safer than the illicit drug. So that's the first and foremost. They start doing something in order to make them feel better, calmer, happier. The second is the same old peer pressure. You have somebody who just wanted to fit in, their friend handed them something, and like I said, the first puff was their choice, and after that, they couldn't control it anymore. So they wanted to fit in, and now they can't do anything about it by themselves. They need our help.
Thank you. This next question's for Officer Murphy. I know you had touched on this earlier. Could you explain a little bit or say it again? What are the consequences for individuals that do provide e-cigarettes or tobacco products to underage individuals? And then what happens if they repeat that after being caught?
So it's a misdemeanor to furnish tobacco to minors. That would be the first offense. The subsequent offense is a gross misdemeanor, which I believe the penalty is 1 year in jail and a $3,000 fine. Of course, the judge can determine what's appropriate.
And that's for the first offense, or?
That's for the second, the subsequent fine. The first offense is misdemeanor, which is, I believe, a 90-day sentence of $1,000.
So potentially, it could add up the first and second offense to multiple thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And, yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you. This next question can be either for Heather or for the ship coordinator. What are the signs you watch for? What are the signs to watch for if you suspect your child is vaping?
I guess not to really answer that question, but I don't have any children old enough yet, but one thing I like to just take note of is, again, you know, we talked about the parent awareness and talking with their children and, you know, trying to be open with them. And as a healthcare provider, obviously I see a lot of children, but the majority of my population is the younger population. It's the kids that are coming in for their routine well child visits, and honestly after the age 5 or 6, the number, it drops off. I'm not seeing those yearly well child visits anymore. So actually the next time I really capture that child is when they're coming in for their sports physical. So I like to take that opportunity to really talk with them about things like tobacco and alcohol and now vaping. So.
Thank you, Heather.
I don't know if you have an answer to that or not, but having experienced it with adolescents ad nauseum, if you see that a child is acting differently than they have before, it's really a sign of any drug addiction. But especially with the strength of this nicotine, what's going to happen is you're going to notice a lot of aggression and anger for no apparent reason, and it's because they're going through withdrawal. And so what we see in a school setting is that they're going to be really, really, really angry when you tell them no, when they ask to go to the bathroom. And it is like the reaction doesn't match the question and answer given. And when they become so aggressive because you said they can't use the restroom, you know why they need to use the restroom, because they're going through withdrawal.
Thank you, Seth.
Other kind of signs you can watch for are decreased cash. Where's all their money going? Because they're spending it all on these jewel pods. nosebleeds will occur. Maybe if your child's using caffeine, they'll stop using caffeine because they're using nicotine instead. Mood swings we touched on. I think that's all of the ones you can really watch for.
The next question would be for the school resource officer or the dean. What would be the most common products you are seeing used in schools? I know you said that the teardrop-shaped one you've confiscated. Are you seeing more commonalities in some of the products that you're confiscating, or are they all kind of varied?
The only thing I can say is it pretty much excludes the earlier first generation, like the blue cigs, like those kind of cigarette looking things.
Yeah, we've seen pretty much all of the rest of them.
Yeah, we've seen everything else but those.
You guys seeing like sweatshirts and things like that?
No, we haven't seen these sweatshirts. No. Not here.
But you were absolutely right, and, you know, any of the jewels or the pods, or, you know, the flavor, it's all across the board. I mean, we saw, we've had gummy bears, we've had, you know, lots of different, and it's always, like you said, tailored to teens. And so that's absolutely correct.
The one thing I did notice is yesterday I got into my stash and started counting up all the items that were, you know, confiscated, and the plastic container that one of the cells were in had this all, like, it leaked through and it's like ate through the plastic, which made a mess, but kind of goes to show that it's kind of corrosive.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Thank you. So then for you two as well, why doesn't the school have, why doesn't the school have an e-cigarette detector in the bathrooms?
Well, it was a conversation we started this summer amongst the administrative team, Officer Murphy as well, and because there are some schools in the state as well as all over the country that have gone to this to try to combat some of the issues that we've seen with use in the bathrooms, specifically on campus. The truth of the matter is they're very, very expensive. I think it was $5,000 for one sensor. And then what was the amount? I can't remember off the top of my head for how much? Like $150 for like a dummy unit. So having one that didn't actually pick it up, but having that presence in the bathroom. So a lot of money certainly involved there, and it's not something that we have taken off of the table here, but it is very, very expensive to have those installed within your building.
I will make a comment about that though too. It was maybe about a month ago I was researching some vaping statistics, and I noticed that they were now available. It's a device you can blow the aerosol into to dissipate the smell, which would make our devices very effective. And they're also, we talked about earlier before the meeting, they're using their shirts and their sleeves to dissipate that aerosol. Or we'll find somewhere else to do it. And it's a deterrent, just like the police constantly deal with that. We'll have squad cars side of the road, slow them down. But really, we got to get to the root of the problem, and these protective factors and the risk factors that we're talking about. Something I did want to point out while I got the floor here is that, over 20% of our kids are getting this device through the mail, and they're ordering online. Now, my child has had a teen checking account, which, the parent would have access to. They have a credit card, so they can order this stuff online. But it's really important that the parent takes an active role in their child's spending. The mail that's coming to the house, the question that was brought up to me was, can a parent open a child's mail if it has their name on it? And the answer is that they can. They can open it up and inspect the contents of the package. There is an exception to that. That's if the child is paying rent at the house somehow, then there's a higher level of expectation of privacy in that situation. But there's still things more that we can do than we can't do as parents. It's just really important that, as a parent to an 8th grader myself, she's hearing and listening, and the influence is incredible. parents don't have as much influence as their peers, so again, to align this, these misperceptions. I was driving through Austin today and I saw P9 coordinator put a billboard up there about, most of their students are also not vaping. But, you look at this data and they think they are. So to try to realign those misperceptions, I think it's another way we can create some protective factors for vaping.
That's great, thank you. The SHIP coordinator, I know you have a lot of knowledge on vaping detectors and certain things about them. Do you want to add anything?
I would agree that when you put it in the bathroom, students are quick to pick up that there's the vaping detector there, and then they just go vape somewhere else. So it doesn't really solve the problem, it just kind of moves the problem somewhere else. And we know they're not very effective about picking up that minimal amount of vapor.
Thank you. And then these last few questions I wanted to reserve for our deputy with the drug task force specifically. With your experience, Deputy Myers, on the Faribault County Sheriff Drug Task Force, what is the most important concern you have regarding vape usage when you look at the county?
Well, I guess the fact is that they can actually use anything they can make liquid, they can vape. We've had pens with methamphetamine, combined with heroin, coke, whatever. I mean, it's something that you can use, and they're going to find a way to use different things. They can't get a hold of a certain product. They're going to try and vape whatever they possibly can get.
So then, you mentioned you were seeing certain harder drugs such as like meth and, well, could you repeat those all?
Like I say, anything you can liquefy, you can vape. I mean, we've got methamphetamine pens that have been positive, heroin, you can do fentanyl, which would be really bad, cocaine, prescription, anything that you can make into a liquid, you can vape. So, I mean, the sky's the limit, especially the ones that you can put anything in them, they can make them to use whatever they want.
Thank you. How often would you say that when you test a vape that they test for something illegal?
Being the fact that we're in drug task force, we usually have actual product of methamphetamine, heroin. For us, the vape pens are more of a secondary type of thing, or if they don't have, a couple ounces of product, then we'll start to test those vape pens and stuff. So we do test them as a last resort, but most of the time we don't usually do much with the vape pens because it's in an adult situation where you see an ounce of cocaine or heroin or meth on the table. The vape pen now is kind of not as relevant as that would be.
Sure, you already have your evidencing. Thank you. And then, what is something you see regarding vaping that is good or gives you hope or you're proud of within the Faribault County Sheriff Drug Task Force? Like, do you see any trends or is there anything emerging that gives you hope or pride?
Well, I guess I drive around in an unmarked minivan, so people don't know that I'm actually a cop. And when you drive by the schools and stuff, you don't see rampant vaping smoke use. You don't see the kids smoking or doing any type of vape product as you're pulling out of the parking lot. So I guess other than that as being, that's a positive, because if they've been sitting in school all day, not able to get out, at least we get in the parking lot and take off. The first thing you're going to do is do something like that. And being our office is right next to the Bloor School, you drive by it all the time and you don't see stuff rolling out the windows or nothing like that. So football games and stuff like that, you don't see kids down underneath the bleachers. I have 3 kids myself that are high school age, or 1 high school age, 2 elementary. I don't hear anybody talking about it, so they probably won't talk to me about it, I guess. But it's one of those things where I just don't see it. But the thing is, though, you know it's there, but you're just not quite as open as that's the point. It's not as open as it is. So.
Thank you. And then for any of the rest of the panel members, if you have something to share about that gives you hope or pride that you see in the culture of the vaping.
Well, just this, the fact that we're having these types of conversations and these types of panels and presentations, anytime you can bring more education into a concern, I think you're taking a step in the right direction. I can speak on behalf of the USC staff and the fact that, before the school year even started, we had a very similar presentation. And so, like Officer Murphy said earlier, we've got eyes on this. Our teachers are more aware of the things to look for. And if there are concerns, those concerns are being relayed to the office. So we are trying to take as proactive of an approach to combat this as we can, and I really think we're moving in the right direction.
Thanks, Joe.
I would agree with that, for sure. We're seeing a much more awareness with vaping. So, and one thing I will say is that just the parents, the importance of our parents in the community, just so incredibly important. Talk to your kids about vaping, have these open conversations. Like I said, I have an 8th grader, and she's more than willing to share who's doing what, when, where, why, and what she's hearing in school. The school counts. So, she just wants to share with me, and I want to keep those lines open. I'm not going to go, wrestle out with her friends and shake them down, but it's really good intel, and we get that from the teachers, and I think we are seeing more parents kind of come around, as we're kind of merging in this new issue. But it's just important to keep an eye on. And like I said, I'm gonna go back to those packages coming in the mail. We gotta just kind of be aware. And Barry was mentioning just when they were ordering packages of baking houses and things like. We have a really close relationship here in Wells with our UPS guy, and he will let us know if he thinks something's off, or if there's vehicles that don't match. He's gonna let us know. It's good to have those relationships with our mail carriers too, our police officers, our dean students. This is good. It's good to keep that open line of communication.
That's excellent, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to share?
Well, I guess I just want to echo what has already been said, and I think we need to go back to the kids. I mean, the hope is in the kids, and the reality is they're recognizing that this isn't good, it's not okay, and they want to breathe clean air, and they want their peers healthy. And so they're not tattling on their friends to get them in trouble. They're tattling on their friends because they want to help them. And I think that's huge. That's where our hope is.
That's great, thank you.
I think we're seeing a lot more youth take action. I work in 3 different counties, and some of them are creating videos to work towards prevention. I think that's really powerful. They're realizing that their voices are heard and that they can make a big impact. And we're also seeing a lot of different policies passing to protect against tobacco use, so that's a lot of strong movement towards decreasing e-cigarette use. Lots of different positive things, and yeah, just having these conversations and being able to record it and being able to share that conversation online is going to be really powerful and positive.
Thank you. I'd like to open up questions to any of the audience members, if you all have any specific questions you'd like to ask.
Have you seen any of the black market pods for these particular items? Like the ones that the kids are getting sick off of that had the vitamin E, whatever.
The thing is, we don't really see a lot of those. Mainly the ones that have are, they could be, but a lot of times you can put your own stuff in there. You can inject it with whatever you want. You can draw the substance out of an actual one and put it in. Also with the black market stuff, yeah, it's honestly, it's all around us. I mean, you can order off the dark web, which I didn't even understand what that was or even thought it was true, but it is. And you can order anything you want from anywhere you want for any amount of money, and they will ship it to you. So the only problem that we have is, yeah, it's out there, but the thing is they can modify what they have and make things work. Some of the dangers of that black market stuff or the dark web stuff is you have no idea what you're getting. I mean, they're sending you stuff from some faraway place that they've made, whatever, and there's no regulations, no nothing, and that's the problem I'm seeing. That's the part that's the horrifying part of that. Like years ago, we had the THC, the synthetic marijuana at all the tobacco stores. We had all the bath salts. That stuff has faded away, thankfully. I mean, we did search warrants and stuff where we were removing boxes of the THC synthetic weed and stuff like that, where now we don't see as much of it. So I'm hoping, like I said, I don't know if it's going to be the same as this, but I hope this fad will go away and they can something else just goes away.
You mentioned the bath salts, and I was going to say that you had said that how they make the mixes of the nicotine and stuff like that, they change it just by a little bit and remarket it. That's just like the bath salts. So maybe, is there who polices this? There's no, that you said the FDA is doing nothing, CDC can't do anything. Is there anybody else that can go after them?
And that's the problem we have with the legislature. They would make a certain compound illegal. And these people are not dumb who make it. So they can go ahead and change it by a molecule here or there, and it does not then qualify as what's illegal. This is something different, so we can use this. And that's the problem we have, because they only go in session so many times a year, or they can't be sitting there all the time doing it. So at the age level we're talking about here are the parents. The parents need to step up, step in. If they see something, they're the ones who need to be the active ones in this. So that's the easiest way to go with it. I know it's, well, one thing I can say is it's the parents.
Okay, one more. Thinking back to the marketing, I remember when I got hooked on cigarettes, there would be ladies on the main street in a busy resort. I lived near a tourist area, and they would hand out little 5-packs of cigarettes to us at 14 years old. You know, hook them when they're young, because you got to keep the stock of people going. And there was nobody to stop that. And then there was. At some point in time, they made sure that nobody was getting cigarettes and people were enforcing the laws. Can the same things occur? Why aren't they going into like gas stations and treating them as providing for minors and things like that, carding and stuff like that?
Well, we do. From the county, we do a tobacco compliance thing. We have all the tobacco places in the county. We get a grant from the health bureau. So the health department, we go around, I check every place. I have a underage kid come with me. It's an educational thing where I have them go and try to buy tobacco. If they fail, I give them the thing that's they're not fined this time. This is an educational purpose only. Go through the stuff. Here's all the stuff. You need to realize that kids try to come in and buy tobacco. Just because it may be 2 o'clock on a Tuesday of the school day doesn't mean that the kid might not have skipped school and is trying to buy tobacco. You need to card everybody all the time. We do those things and stuff, but the only problem is that a lot of those stores have a high turnover in employee rates. A lot of times they don't get the training. They're lucky they can even run the cash register a lot of times, and they just get put into a spot, and it's not their fault. It's just lack of education.
I think it's important to note that, you know, politicians in general want people to be able to make decisions for themselves. And so, you know, they don't want to make legislation that is going to restrict the rights of somebody who is an adult. And so what happens is that they want to wait until local control does the policing. And, you know, let Wells make decisions for what's happening in Wells, because you know your community better. Let Blue Earth make decisions for what's happening in Blue Earth, because Blue Earth knows their community better. But I think what happens is like with everything else. I mean, you bring up a very, very valid point with a very valid product, and you pretty soon, I mean, when I was young, Joe the Camel was in commercials on television. You can no longer put tobacco products in commercials. That hasn't happened yet with e-cigarette products, okay? So I do believe that this is going to evolve just like tobacco did, just like alcohol has, in the sense that it has become and is rapidly becoming faster a public health crisis. And I mean, Governor Walz just today, I mean, Minnesota is suing Juul. The state of Minnesota filed a lawsuit against Juul. And the soundbite I heard from the governor today was, you cannot tell me that they have not sat in a room and figured out how to target kids. So it's coming. It's just like with everything else, it has to prove it's bad.
I was at a conference in August, and the Surgeon General was there, and they said they're really looking at local. They want to see local levels passing policies so that when the state goes and tries to pass a policy or higher, they want the local approval and see that that's what they want. And then also to kind of touch on how they used to give away kind of like the cigarette 5-packs, they discount Juuls down to 99 cents because they know if you smoke these 4 pods, you're going to be addicted. So in the long run, they're going to make a lot of money. And along with the regulation, it all takes time So that's why it's important to kind of get a jump on it and make sure to let people know how dangerous these products are before the regulations are put in place, and they're able to pull from tobacco's playbook, which we know is very successful, and tobacco has stock in e-cigarettes, so they're following their playbook very carefully and closely, unfortunately.
Were there any other questions from audience members?
I like to be a little more proactive than reactive. Officer Murphy, you said we need to get to the root of the problem, and I forgot your name from the Adolescent Treatment Center, but you said the number one reason kids do this is because of mental health. Just wondering, did any of you know what USC is doing to support kids who have anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts?
Well, we have two wonderful school social workers here, and they're sitting here in the audience today, and they deal with our mental health, and well, we all kind of deal with it, because mental health presents in many different ways, but a lot of times it presents in a way where we become aware of a behavior, and because of that behavior, we're able to refer it on to our social workers, who are, you know, much more qualified than we are to talk about mental health.
Is there anywhere in USC a suicide hotline?
We have an anonymous tip line. That's something we did create 2 years ago. So that's something that any student can report mental health, or they're concerned about suicide, or they're on drugs, or vaping, and
Really, any concern.
Yeah.
But do you have the state, if someone wants to commit suicide in Vaping, do you have the state, not to contact you, but the state suicide prevention hotline?
I'm not certain if we have the state hotline posted at the school.
Or the text, there's a text, it's a hotline.
Do you guys know if we have that available? Yeah.
Is it posted anywhere in school?
It's not a bad idea, you know, to certainly post the number. I know that we were at a meeting yesterday. It was a community resilience meeting, that we had talked about some various community resources and how to kind of different parts of our community are supposed to kind of get a hold of that. But I don't know if we have the number actually posted in the school. But yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you for bringing that up.
We do have the local anonymous hotline. We have that posted several places within the building, but not the same, so maybe that is something to look at.
And I can just tell you that on the statewide level, in order to support your school district, because these things cost money, and I know that for a while you had one school social worker, and you were able to add a second, which is very needed. And I think that is probably the one thing that schools will cry out for the most. And so the state is starting to respond, and they're creating grants for mental health supports in the school. Unfortunately, right now the process to get those grants is quite extensive and cumbersome. But my hope is that soon they're no longer going to just try to block granted out, because what we're saying then is only certain areas of the state really need this, when we know that's not true. And in fact, in rural Minnesota, we probably have more problem in this area, simply because we don't have the resources that you would have in a more metropolitan center. And so the hope is that eventually it's just going to get rolled into per pupil dollars. And so we'll have that funding available so that all kids get the help they need when they need it.
There are some great programs that are being created as well. One of them is Change to Chill. They have a website. It was created by youth for youth. It has a lot of different ideas around mindfulness, gratitude. There's lots of different formats. You can listen to it, a meditation. You can look up different yoga poses on it. You can look up videos. There's different scripts you can go through with your student classes. Just lots of different resources and a different way to approach it for different people that learn differently. And then just to kind of add to that, I do know that in the health standards, mental health has been added to the health standards, and so now health classes have to address mental health,
And certainly one of those is signs, symptoms, and those kinds of things. But the other thing is you know, what do we do to cope? What skills can we learn so that we can work through these things?
Excellent responses, thank you. Were there any other questions from audience members that you'd like to ask?
So I have a son that attends the school, he's a little bit young yet, but if he was to come to me and say he saw somebody vaping or he saw somebody, would I contact the school directly? What would be the best way to contact to talk about or get some response from something like that?
Well, generally, I think most parents will say, well, I'm calling the school cop, and that's good. You can contact myself, you can contact Joe, contact any one of our principals in the elementary or in the high school. Really, any adult. I mean, they're going to get us a message, for sure. You can report on our non-spot or not just their line.
Well, and anytime we get a report as well, we follow through and we look into that. So, yeah, whether it be the elementary principal or elementary office that you contact or the high school office, that message will get, relayed to the right person so we can do our in-school investigation.
Yeah, we had one, I think it was probably about 5 weeks ago, it was a 6th grader that we had heard was possibly had a vaping device, and we did investigate that, found that was not credible, but we were able to have that conversation either way with the students, so that's kind of a part of it, is we're able to kind of reinvest it, what does it look like, and what it does, what the harmful effects are, so we're able to kind of educate that too.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from audience members? Okay, I think at this time then, I'd like to thank all of our panel members for their expertise and input. So please give them a hand. So thank you very much. I know that some of you have traveled from other parts of this county to come here and share your expertise, so we really do appreciate you coming and being a part of this and participating. Thank you to Kaylee, the SHIP coordinator, for the presentation and being part of the panel, and to her intern for also helping with that as well. And then we'd also like to say a special thank you to Laura, our USC Community Education Director. Without her, we wouldn't be here. This was all her idea. And she really spearheaded this and helped coordinate this as well, so a special thank you to Laura. Laura and Kaylee, please give them a round of applause. Thank you, audience members, as well, for coming here. We know that Thursday nights can be busy and you have lots of stuff in your lives, so thank you very much for making the time to come here and being a part of this as well. This is all for you. So, thank you very much, audience members. With that, I'd like to say that if you have any other questions that you just thought of or didn't want to say over the microphone, we'll be up here picking up stuff if you'd like to come and ask those questions. Also, I'd like to remind you that there are some resources up here as far as information on vapes and where to get help if you know somebody that has a problem. And we have conversation starter packs as well. We were talking about one of the best tools that we have in our pockets for prevention with our youth or reaching our youth was just having conversations. These starter packs have different questions that you can use to start conversations with. Some of them are a little more challenging, like what would you do if your friend has been caught vaping, or how can you talk to your friends about not vaping or something. And then other questions are more fun, like if you had a superpower, what would it be? Just different things that you can use to start conversations. If you'd like to grab one of those as well. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody, and we will adjourn.